So to get to the real root of diversity and what we need it to be, I did some studying and I tried to peel back what it has become. And so this is what diversity is not. I got ahead of myself. Diversity is not political correctness. We talked a little bit about that because I was at a training once, and a woman stood up and she raised her hand when I asked, are there questions? And she said, Andre, I just want to know, why are all the colored people moving into my neighborhood? How do you think the audience responded? Yeah, were you guys there? That's exactly what they did. And why'd they go?
Like colored people.
Yeah, because she said colored people, and you're not supposed to say that, but it's okay to say people of color. But that's a whole other conversation, right? So she didn't have the right words, and it was so funny because some of my friends were in the room, and they were like, "Oh, you don't get her," right? And so I stood there and I looked at the woman, and it became very obvious to me that she did not have all the stamps in her passport. That not all of her crayons were very sharp. But she stood up with a pure heart and she asked the question that was on her mind. And so what was my responsibility to her as the teacher?
Answer her question.
To answer her question. We can talk about political correctness stuff at another time, at a different place, but I needed to answer her question. Because I've also been in contact with people who had the right words, they knew the politically correct things to say, but as they're talking to you, your skin just crawls. Because you can hear the nastiness behind what they're saying, right? So diversity is not political correctness. It's not about black and white, and I mean both the racial construct as well as the absolutes. It is not just about what's right and wrong. There's a lot of gray area that we all can fit in when we have these diversity conversations. It's not about blame, guilt, or fault. If you feel bad in my presentation, or you walk out of this room feeling guilty about something, I obviously have not done my job correctly. Because what does blame, guilt, and fault do for your motivation? Do you give your best when you're shamed into doing something? Think about the gifts that you give your parents sometimes. Are those your best gifts? Yeah, my mom had one. You didn't have to call. I know you're busy. I'll be dead soon. All this stuff. So I have to do this stuff out of obligation more so than out of the love that I have for her. And then diversity is not therapy. I'm not trying to make anybody cry. I don't want you to feel bad. I have office hours for that. All right. It's also not about meritocracy. And meritocracy is the concept that if you work hard enough, you can be just like me. What's the problem with meritocracy, or that concept of meritocracy? That if you work hard enough, you can be just like me.
You don't want to be like you?
Yeah, maybe you don't want to be like me. What makes me the rules, right? It would be a shame if LeBron James was forced to play basketball the way I do, right? So meritocracy is the answer. And lastly, diversity is not about tolerance. And people get really nervous when I talk about this because people have built their whole careers on this whole concept of diversity being tolerance. But what does tolerance mean? To put up with, right? My brother-in-law came to visit. I tolerated that dude. Why? I knew when he was leaving. Right? Toughness side of tolerance is this notion that I will tolerate these different people or these different ways of being, these different thoughts, because I know at some point they'll go away. Right? So diversity is not all of those things. Diversity is, however, that was my family. The fact that there's dignity and honor being human. What is dignity? What is dignity? Self-respect. What else is dignity? Is dignity something that you have or something that you give? It is in fact both, right? It is in fact both. And the interesting thing is when you don't give people dignity, you don't give them, or you don't recognize their right to exist and live, they'll try to take it from you. For example, I don't know if this happens where you live, but it happens all the time where I am. That I'm at a traffic light or a stop sign, and there's a group of teenagers trying to cross the street. One would think, with their youth and their beauty, they could cross faster than they do, right? And I used to think it's because their pants were hanging too low. But I've seen them really, hype them up and put those really tight belts on and get moving. But then I realized one day, I'm sitting there at the light, and one of the kids is passing by, and one of them makes direct eyeball-to-eyeball contact with me. And it's walking slowly. As if to say, you're kind. You adults don't see me any other time, but you will see me right now. And so when we don't give people dignity and honor, they try to get it in all sorts of ways. What they don't understand, though, is that I have really good car insurance and no points in my license. Honor. Honor is respect at a high level. Who have we said as a society we will give high levels of respect to? Who? To the president, all right? To the office of the president. Who else? Our parents, right? Our grandparents. Those people who have done things on our behalf. Servicemen and women. Law enforcement officers. We said we will give them high levels of respect because they fight battles for us that sometimes we've never even known existed, right? Please raise your hand if you can answer yes to these next two questions. Raise your hand if you either passed a test or purchased a ticket that allowed you to be born on this planet. All right. None of us have done anything to bring ourselves here. We all accepted an invitation. I don't like to think about how that invitation came. It's very disgusting. But we all accepted an invitation to be here. And we're doing the best we can to be human. And when I searched for a definition of human, I found something very interesting, that it has two definitions. One being a noun, being a biped, having opposable thumbs, a big brain, and a belly button. If you ever encounter a person without a belly button, be concerned, right? A noun. But also, that human is also an adjective. And what do adjectives do? They describe the noun. And so what is it that we teach the youngest of our species, our nieces, our nephews, our sons and daughters, about what it means to be human? What do we teach them? We teach them respect. What else do we teach them? We teach them language. What else do we teach them? We teach them love. Right? So this is what it means to have true and authentic diversity, that there's dignity and honor in being human. All right? We're going to do one last activity, and I think, can I just let you out early? Would that be okay? Mm-hmm. All right, cool. I'll let you out early. And I have markers for folks who need something to write with and write fluent. You may need some markers, so I'll just help you. So I do have permanent markers that some folks may need or want, so I'll put those down at the end of the row. So, very simple question. What did you learn growing up? And on the back, I want you to respond to this question in a very particular kind of way. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at the categories across the top in gray. And I'd like for you to look at the blue categories on the left, and I want you to tell me what each of those blue categories taught you about each one of those groups in gray. All right? But I want you to do it in a very particular kind of way. I want you to put a plus if you learn something positive about those groups across the top, or if you learn something negative, I want you to put a minus in that box. Or if you never had a conversation, I want you to put a 0. All right? So if you learn something positive, put a plus. If you learn something negative, put a minus. And if you didn't have that conversation at all, put a 0. You can have pluses and minuses in the same area. All right? So for example, parents and family. What did they teach me about Asian Americans? I have pluses and minuses there. Friends, what did we talk about? What did they try to teach me about disabled Americans? I put a 0. I will put a 0 there. All right? So we'll give you just a couple of minutes to do that. If you need a marker, just raise your hand and I'll bring one to you. Please stop right where you are. The rest of that is for homework. What I would like for you to do, though, is to have a conversation with about 3 people or 4 people around you about where you were on your card. So your pluses and minuses and so forth. As comfortable as it is to share. If you can talk, and we'll do this probably in the next 3 minutes or so. So if you can talk with people around you around what's on your card. All right, stop. So as you were talking in your small group, were there some themes or some general concepts that came out of that, or what were some things that you thought were important as part of your conversation?
Too much grandparents, more than parents, or more prejudiced,
Okay, so it seemed like your grandparents were more bigoted than your parents. All right. Other folks.
movies were somewhat of a negative
Okay.
experience.
Okay, so you experienced movies as being negative. Okay. Did anyone else find that? Did you have any negatives in new movies? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so there were stereotypical thoughts of certain populations. Yep. And I would go out on a limb and say that all populations are stereotyped. Because not all of the people that they show up in real life just like they do in the movies, right? Men always strong. I met a woman the other day who was a power lifter. She was a Zumba instructor. Pipes. Her, what muscle is this? The tricep. Oh, that sucker is as big as my head. There's no way. So I think TV movies do a great job of exploiting stereotypes. Right? Other things that came up in your discussion. Okay, so depending on where you grew up, things can be different. Greater Minnesota versus probably being in the cities versus being in South Dakota, right? It can be quite different. And time. I'd imagine that time plays a role in some of those things as well. Other things.
Our jobs.
Your jobs. So what about your jobs? What came up?
Well, we see a lot of negative things.
Okay, so it's oftentimes in the workplace.
Well, but it's not positive, so.
Okay. Yep, so sometimes we see negative things even in the workplace. Okay? So I don't want to know what you have positives and negatives in. That's none of my business. That's a personal assessment, and that's for you. But I am curious as to if there were any emotions or thoughts that were going through your mind, or what were the emotions and thoughts going through your mind as you were having to put pluses, minuses, and zeros in each of these boxes. Embarrassment. Other thoughts, emotions.
Personal experiences.
What about personal experiences?
For example, when I was looking at the Asian population, my first experience was not a very positive one. I felt like they were being real disrespectful and that the Arizona was wild.
Okay. You thought that they were being very disrespectful in your first impression. Okay. Cool. Embarrassment. Other folks.
These are good messages that I had growing up, so send that to my kids.
Okay. Sending those good messages to your kids. I want to relieve some of the pressure in the room. And I want to say this, and I want to be quite frank and honest, that your parents and your grandparents did the best they could with what they had at the time that they felt was appropriate. Some of your grandparents or your extended family may refer to people outside of their either God-given name or the category that is socially acceptable. It's not their fault. What are they trying to get? What is the bigot trying to get? What do we say? It was on this card. The three things the bigot's trying to get is what? Significance, belonging, and safety. Now, we all want significance, belonging, and safety. It's a great goal. The problem with the bigot is what? The method. How they get there. Right? Now, how many people are good people? Please raise your hand if you are a good person. Based on however you qualify that, please raise your hand if you are a good person.